right, welcome everyone. Lewis here from Rope-A-Dope. I'm at the Rope-A-Dope room and I have the great pleasure today of patching into Chicago and speaking with Grammy winner and NEA jazz master Ramsey Lewis. I don't think Mr. Ramsey Lewis needs much of an introduction to most people who are watching, but just hitting some of the points. 50 years in this game, changing the crossover between jazz, funk, pop. He started with a hit, The In Crowd in 1956, went straight to the top of the charts and hasn't looked back. 81 albums, and his seventh album with the group Urban Nights was released here at Rope-A-Dope in 2019. Mr. Ramsey Lewis, thank you so much for taking the time and welcome.
It's good to be here, Lewis. How are you today?
I am well. I'm COVID good.
Yeah.
Here we are in 2020. The world has changed. I've been communicating with a lot of artists around the world. People have had different responses to this. And we have everything from people who have been going live and doing shows online to folks who are completely new to the technology. And I have to say, you are on top of your game.
Well, my wife put me on top of my game.
Gotcha.
You know.
So for those who are watching, I want to say that you can find Ramsey Lewis performing live on the last Saturday of every month, is it?
Yeah, 1 p.m. Chicago time.
Yeah, Saturday Salon, and you've got several done already. And I just noticed again today that you're launching a new series on Facebook.
I am.
The name Between the Keys. We're going to talk about that, but it's a chance for you to get in and ask Mr. Lewis questions. So I guess you answered the first question, but maybe you can describe it a little bit more. How did you not miss a beat here and continue performing through the internet at such a challenging time?
Well, because I've been practicing piano since I was 7, 8 years old. It's just part of my day. It's just part of my life. And so I was practicing the piano and I was learning some songs, and I got to one song and I couldn't remember it well, and I just kept working at it until finally I got it to go. It was The Wind by Russ Freeman that he had on an album with Chet Baker and strings. And so when I finally got it to go and the whole thing, I played it down, and my wife, Jan, I didn't know she'd been standing there with her iPhone, and she taped the last version of it, and she was like, "What is that? That's so beautiful." I said, "Well, something I used to play," and she sent it. She thought it was so beautiful. She sent it to Brett, my manager, and he thought it was beautiful. So one thing led to another, and I said, "I'm not going in the studio. I'm not doing it." He says, No. Maybe we can do something from your living room." I said, "Well, if I can stay home and do something, I'd be glad to do it." And so that's what I'm doing. You're right. Every Saturday, 1 o'clock Chicago time, I'm sitting in my living room, playing the piano for an hour, and it goes around the world. And it's $20, but most of the money goes to American. I forgot about Jazz Foundation of America. Because the Jazz Foundation of America helps musicians that are not as fortunate as I, and they need some help. So we send the money to them, and they know who's who. And so we're proud that we can do that too.
That's an amazing thing that you can enjoy this intimate performance and also be assisting other jazz musicians in the process, because we do know they need it, right? So many people are hurting. You were on the road. You've been on the road for 50 years, right? But you had reached a point where you thought you were going to hang it up, and then you went out for a few more. And now this comes along. I mean, how surprised are you that this is where you are right now?
Well, it's funny how things come along, and I got off the road just a couple, 3 years before this came along. And the reason I got off the road is because the road told me I should get off the road. We were playing some gigs, and one after another, they changed the gate, and my wife said, told the skycap, get me a wheelchair. I said, I've never used a wheelchair at any airport, including O'Hare, which is a pretty big airport. She says, yes, honey, but you're no longer 20 years old, and it's a faraway gate. And to myself, I started mumbling, what does this mean? You know, and then that was one happening. And then another thing happened. We played Cozumel, Mexico, and but it was an easy trip. You fly from O'Hare to St. Louis, and you change planes to St. Louis and go right to Cozumel. No big deal. Well, the plane, we got to St. Louis, but the plane was late leaving St. Louis, and you get to Cozumel and blah, blah, blah. Coming back, the same thing. I guess what I'm saying, traveling, it's got to be not as easy as I remembered it was when I was younger. They changed the gates and this, that, and the other. And I said, well, honey, what we got in the bank? She says, well, I think you got enough in there. If you want to hang it up, you can. And so I decided I wouldn't do that, but I can't hang up the piano. I mean, the piano's been part of me forever and ever. And you know the rest of that story.
Yeah, we had a great conversation about your. There's a podcast out there where you broke down learning the piano, and you learned to love it. Yeah, as you went along.
Right.
You know, I just saw.
12 years old. By the time I was 12, I loved it.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, it's treated you well, and you've treated it well, I think, over the years here. I was just someone was talking about B.B. King today. I guess maybe it was his birthday today. But I saw him. I mean, he took the wheelchair all the way out to the stage on his last gigs. But you know, he could kind of just sit back comfortably with his guitar.
A lot of musicians just couldn't give it up, and not that they needed the money. They just needed to play. They needed to be in front of people. They needed the what is the roar of grease paint, the smell of the crowd, or whatever it is. And thank God I didn't need that. So I was able to walk away. But you're right. A lot of musicians just do it until they can't. And well, it's more power to them.
We're learning from some of our conversations in quarantine, and it with everything I do and all the communication that I have with musicians, I didn't realize this. I thought the fans really needed to see the music, and I thought the musicians needed to earn a living, but I didn't realize that many musicians need that crowd. Like there's a certain human interchange or exchange that happens for them as performers that it was a devastating blow this year for that to happen. When you do these performances, is there a chat room? Is someone talking to the crowd, or does that happen? Or is it just watching?
When I do these performances, what actually happens is people send in questions, and Jan tells me, Sally Jones from Omaha, Nebraska wants to know blah, 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 blah. And then I answer the question sitting there at my piano in my living room.
Wow.
And we get several pages of people sending in questions. I mean, it just makes me feel good that those many people not only are listening, but they feel enough to send in questions.
Amazing that this technology can bring that intimacy to it. Do you have any of the most challenging or interesting or best questions that you'd like to share today?
Well, most of them, believe it or not, are requests for songs.
Oh,
most of them want to hear more of in-crowd type songs or Sun Goddess type songs or more to hit record type songs. Very few of them get deep into my life or this or that. I guess they hear me talk about that during the show or whatever.
Well, I just watched, a live video of the in-crowd from way back in the day. Um,
Wow.
and yeah, do you ever go back and look? I mean, it's
No.
probably memory lane for you. It's like I was so nostalgic, but what hit me really was just the groove, the like undeniable impulse. It just makes you get up and dance. Like, so we introduce you and we say, Grammy winner, but we say NEA Jazz Master. But there's a groove there that you've always had. Do you think that early stuff was really jazz?
Well, fortunately, the three of us liked not only jazz, but we liked gospel music, we liked R&B and other kinds of music. And so during those days, a lot of the critics and reviewers put you down if they didn't hear some bebop licks in there, some bebop rhythms.
Mm.
And it never bothered us because the influence of gospel, the influence of R&B, the influence of blues, and those rhythms from those other kinds of music, we just love to play it. And the three of us just ended up together. And there it was. And besides, I didn't know how to play bebop. And that was the kind of the language of jazz during those days, or some form of it. And so when I didn't know, I don't know if I told you this, but I first started playing with LD and Red when the group broke up because of the Korean War, and LD and Red were the drummer and bass player left,
Yeah.
and I started playing with them, and they said, "Okay, Ramsey, play Penthouse Serenade," and I said, "I don't know Penthouse Serenade." Well, then just as a feature, you do "I'm in the Mood for Love." Well, I don't know "I'm in the Mood for Love," so it was from the ground up that I learned the music and learned to love the music.
Beautiful, beautiful. I wanted, it's funny you said that some critics, uh, pointed out the difference. I don't think musicians today are in a much different situation. Especially, I mean, at least here at our label, a lot of people, I guess they don't get a bad review. They just don't get any notice if it doesn't hit that traditional sort of jazz vibe. What advice would you have for them at this point? Like, if it feels good, do it, or
Yeah, you got to do what's natural to you, what feels good to you, and hang in there. Because to just continue to repeat the bebop language from the 30s, 40s, that's okay, but you got to come on up into the times that we're living now and play what you feel and know. There was a time when you had to, if you didn't play something out of that bebop language, you weren't considered jazz. It was John Coltrane was the first one to change and play what he wanted to play. And it was sheets of sound is what they called him. And that started something else going on. So I mean, even if you went to New York and played, and you didn't play something that sounded like bebop, they would get up. The audience, but some jazz musicians, some of them would stand there and say, "Oh," and they'd walk out.
wow,
But I say to jazz musicians today, play what you feel. You got to play what you feel. That's the best way you can be real. I mean, that's the way. And if you play what you feel and it's real, that's going to reach out and touch people, and they're going to say, "Ah, that's different, but I like it. There's something about it that I like."
yeah,
And that's what keeps the music going. And that's what brings in new stars. That's what brings in new piano players, new trumpet players, new saxophone players, what have you. Because they say, "Oh, he's playing something different, but I like it." Now you can't, one piece of advice, you can't get on stage and practice. You can't get on stage and play arpeggios and music that you've been practicing in your hotel room A long time ago, people used to get away with that. You got to play something from inside your soul, inside your being, and show that you know the music, but show that also you have something to feel and say to other people from inside you.
How does a musician who has gone through years of training and practicing peel away the layers to find that piece that's inside them?
Well, after practicing your scales and arpeggios, just sit there and try to make up stuff,
Mm.
no matter what you play. You know, if it's a horn, or if it's a piano, whatever it is, try composing. Try making. And I'm not trying. I'm not saying be a composer. I'm saying make up something. Sit there and play something from your heart, from your soul. And if you're going after jazz, it'll come. You just have to trust yourself and trust what you're doing.
Mm.
It's best if you put in the time to learn your instrument. Okay, after and you never 100% totally learn your instrument, because I practice scales and arpeggios every day. But when you're trying to find yourself, sit there and let it come. See what comes, whether you're playing a horn or piano.
Mm. There's a lot happening in Chicago right now. I wonder if you could tell us. Are you listening to any of the younger cats that are there, or what's new that you're listening to?
Well, I was, but the clubs are closed,
Yeah, yeah.
and so there's nowhere to go listen to the younger people here. There's a lot of young talent here, believe me, coming out of some of the schools, coming out of um, some of them didn't go to school; they just taught themselves, but they were playing the clubs. Because Chicago's always been known for jazz clubs,
Mm.
but since this bug has been around, there's nowhere to hear anybody anymore, and it's too bad.
Mm. So what about recorded music? Do you spin vinyl or?
Oh yeah, I listen to a lot of records.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have I don't no, I don't do vinyl. I just got I have about between 17, 18, 20,000 songs on my iPod, and
Wow.
yeah, and it goes back from before Charlie Parker. I mean, before then, it goes up to now to some of the latest young musicians, and so that way I keep on top of what was, what could be, and what is.
I'm curious. You've probably been asked the question before, but like who would your top five be, or is that not fair?
Oh boy! Oh
It's
boy!
tough, right?
Oh boy! Oh boy! Oh boy!
We can move on.
Oh boy!
That's too tough a question. I don't think I could answer that
Well,
question.
if you're gonna, you gotta go with, if you gotta say like Art Tatum, hello.
Hmm.
You gotta say Charlie Parker. You gotta say John Coltrane. As a jazz composer, you gotta say Duke Ellington.
Hmm.
There's four right there, and I'm sure there's a
Blakey,
fifth one. Who?
Art Blakey.
Art Blakey, as a not only a drummer, but he had the ability to bring great young musicians out of wherever they were and play with this band, Lee Morgan, and I mean, and the list goes on. The amount of young musicians that Art Blakey came and presented, Bobby Timmons and others. They went on to have their own groups.
What about music outside of jazz? Is there anything that you gravitate towards?
Yeah, yeah. European classical, of course. I love to hear Vladimir Horowitz. I love to hear Rudolf Serkin. I love to hear Chicago Symphony. I just love, and I can't think of all the names of classical musicians that I listen to: pianists, violinists, horn players, orchestras, quintets, sextets. I, I think it's just that I listen to all kinds of music, and that feeds my soul. That feeds my creativity, if you will. Because when you sit down to your instrument and start playing your instrument, it's everything in you that starts coming out in your terms, if you're honest. I
Mm,
don't know if I'm making this clear,
mm,
but there's nothing new under the sun. Nobody can say this has never been played before. I
right.
mean, there's only so many notes in the scale. Okay, but you know, if you listen to great musicians, great music, and you're honest with yourself, then when you start playing yourself and performing yourself in your own way, you're reinterpreting in your own style and your own group of notes what you heard before. Now, do I play like Art Tatum? I'd love to, but I can't, and I
Mm,
wouldn't begin to. But what impresses me with him is he could play the instrument. He knew the instrument. And what impresses me with others is the same thing, just about, but different styles. And they too decided that they were going to be true to yourself. And I think that's so important in this music we call jazz, or in any form of music, to be true to oneself and not feel, well, if I take the music that he or she recorded, but I changed it just a little bit, that's not going to work.
mm, mm. Uh, I heard, I think it was Elton John last week say something that, the songs that are being written today in pop music aren't really songs. Uh, and I guess it kind of speaks to what I hear you saying is that all the music has already been written, so to speak. There's nothing new, like you said, under the sun. But it's that full expression of the individual that matters. And I wonder if somebody could really get that with 5 writers or 12 writers on a track, and going in and recording a song that I don't even know how they make it theirs.
Well, pop music is a little different because somebody writes a lyric and somebody comes along and changes the lyric a bit, and somebody comes along and changes it once more before they say it's final. There are 3 writers right there.
Mm,
And in pop music and R&B, same thing. Somebody writes a bass line or chords or what they think is a hit melody, but somebody else comes along, or even the person who's going to perform says, I'd rather have these 3 notes here and these 4 notes there. And on the bridge, I want this, that, and the other. Well, all of a sudden, he's one of the composers.
mm,
That's why when you pick up a pop or R&B record, there are many composers that you see their names that made a contribution to the song.
mm. But but the in crowd was on the pop charts
Yeah.
in the 50s. So have you've seen it all? How has it changed? Like it's not the same. Could you see an instrumental like that going to the pop charts today?
Oh boy. Oh boy. What was great about music in those days, that it was more simple in terms of, here's the bass line, here are the chords, and here's the melody. And so a jazz guy can take that and do what he or she will and make it his or her own. And that's what he did with the In Crowd and Hang On Sloopy
Mm.
and others. Um,
Who picked those songs?
well, by listening, let's see, the In Crowd, the In Crowd, the In Crowd. Oh, LD and Red and I were at this coffee shop, and we had all the songs for the In Crowd album. And don't forget, it was the 12th or 13th album. So fortunately, each album had sold a little more than the last one, so the record company was patient. They said, well, we're making our money back plus some.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were putting this album together, and we needed one more song. And the waitress came over. I won't forget her name because she was attached to this big hit, Nettie Gray. And she said, what are you guys doing? And we said, what we're doing, we're trying to find a nice, happy song we're going to put on the album. And she says, have you heard Dobie Gray's The In Crowd? And LD and Red had heard it. I hadn't heard it.
Wow.
So she said, well, it's on the jukebox. And she went over to the jukebox. I don't know how many coffee shops have jukeboxes these days, but she went over to the jukebox and played The In Crowd. by Adobe Green. And I said, yeah, that works. You know, we've got all the meat and potatoes. We've got the stuff that's going to sell the album. We've got the strong material that's going to make the album go. And this is just a little sweetener. This is just a little afterthought.
Mm.
Well, little did I know that became the driver of the album, the instrumental version of the In Crowd.
Yeah, it was very sweet, the sweetener. uh, just
And
one.
you know, when we
Go
we
ahead.
almost when we after we recorded it, we were still playing clubs because we weren't popular enough to play concert halls yet, and so we were playing. I forgot this club in Washington D.C. and we were about to end the set, and Red Holt, the drummer, he says we should play that new song. I said, oh yeah,
Oh.
and we started playing it, and people started dancing, and they got up from their seats and were clapping their hands. And the three of us looked at each other with our eyes wide open. It's like, wow, okay. And sure enough, as the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah, it just gave me chills thinking about that excitement, that power. That's amazing. Beautiful thing. One last question for you before I let you go. I do want to stop for 1 second. I'm going to say it again after this question, but I want to point people to your Facebook page, facebook.com/Ramsey Lewis Music, is it? I wrote it down. Ramsey Lewis Jazz. And so people, if you're watching, you should follow that and get hip to the live sessions that Mr. Lewis is doing, so you can get tickets and also tune in on the weekends. I have a question that comes to me from my partner over here at Rope-A-Dope. You've been doing this for 50 years, and he wants to know it's Fabian Brown, by the way, for the record. He wants to know what gets you out of bed in the morning after all this time. What motivates you and continues to inspire you to create music?
Well, fortunately, I have a great wife, and life with Jan is the best. And we have breakfast together, and that starts the day. And generally, we talk about what we're going to do. She's an artist, and the room I'm in now was a bedroom, and she's turned that into an art studio. And she gets in here and she does her thing, and I go to my piano. And just being alive and being able to do what I love, and then share it with other people. Even before I was able to have the Saturday concerts where people were tuning in, it's just that I just love to play the piano, and it's great to go in the living room and start playing. And that's how I influenced her, and well, the rest is history. I've told the story before. And I like to read now. And don't ask me which books. I got a stack of books over there that I'm reading from. I like to read magazines. I like to keep up with what's going on. Books from all sorts of directions in life. I don't read much fiction, but reading read the newspapers, magazines, books, and I do watch the evening news. I don't watch television all day. I just watch the evening news, and there you go.
Yeah, happy life away from social media and the barrage of news as well. It sounds like.
Exactly.
That's
exactly.
the tip. Mr. Lewis, I can't thank you enough. I really appreciate your time, and I'm just so inspired and excited that this is what's happening for you around everything that's happening in the world, and you're able to connect with people, and that you're such a valuable asset in people's lives, and that people are still able to connect with you. So thank you so much for all of it. And
well, I enjoy speaking with you, and let's do it again. Anytime you feel the urge, give me a call.
You got it. I want to remind people as we sign off here that you can go to facebook.com/Ramsey Lewis Jazz, hit that like button and get notifications. But there's a Saturday salon. This is scheduled for the last Saturday of the month, each month, where you can see Ramsey Lewis perform live from his home, and you can even send in questions and requests. The ticket link would be on the Facebook page or at stageit.com, I believe. And also, while you're on Facebook, check out what Mr. Lewis is doing on Saturdays, I believe, just answering questions online. So it's a
That's
chance
right.
to connect.
And don't forget, a large portion of the money that comes from those performances goes to the Jazz Foundation of America, that helps other musicians that need help.
Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
All right.
Look forward to talking with you again.
Bye.
Bye-bye.